Sati Sampajanya, the here and now, being aware. So this word sati is the clue. It's remembering here and now, reminding yourself. So just using the word Paccuppanna Dhamma, or here and now. The Dhamma of now. Paccuppanna is now. Now this simple enough, but in man's curiosity searches the past and present and clings to that dimension, but the point of intersection of the timeless with time, and say, this is sati. So remember, all memories are about the past. Memory, I mean, sati, even the word sati is a memory, but it's using memory as a guide rather than from the personal level of, I did this, I did that happened to me in the past. So it's like learning to use our ability to remember, not from sakkayaditthi anymore, about what I did in the past, or my life and things that I remember from my past, but the samana life, samana is not a person anymore. It's not about becoming, but being that pure presence here and now, which has no quality. It isn't like it's not like a worldly attainment. Or it's not, doesn't create this sense of me and mine, individuality. But so sati sampajanya, sati panya, these words, these magic words, reminder. So when I do this, then developing this practice around the sound of silence, because over the years this is what happens, just here and now Dhamma, and then the awareness around this resonating background vibration. Now I can create myself as someone who uses the sound of silence or things like this. Like I can create a self-image around these kind of words, but that's not that's not sati sampajanya. So we can create ourselves in, we're so used to sanya sankhara as our identity, that we totally committed to the sense of me and mine, and unquestioned, operating always from my practice, my sound of silence, my mindfulness, my position, my view. And then this is the world, this is the samsara, and then as soon as you create yourself, or just habitually get entwined, stuck into the self-view, operate from the self-view, then that the result will always be separation of some kind, a feeling of loneliness, of alienation or fear, or this separate sense of a self makes me feel very vulnerable, because I am on a personal level. If I'm this body, this is me, and this is my emotional world, and then it can be attacked, it can be harmed, it can be abused by so many possibilities, that you can, before they even happen, you could imagine almost anything. So in the five khandhas, the rupa, vedana, sanya, sankhara, vijnana practice, this is for reflection. Like rupa, the body. Now that is, did you create your body as a person, or did it just happen? The body was born before I had a personality. I wasn't born with a personality, with any identity, but the physical body was born and it's conscious. So the vijnana and rupa, these are natural conditions. They're not, we don't create them out of ignorance. They arise and cease according to other conditions, following the law of karma, the laws of nature. But then, when we identify with the body, that we learn after we're born. So then you start, your mother, father, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, the whole society starts conditioning you, so you create this sense of I'm this physical form. I'm a baby, I'm a child, I'm a boy or a girl. And these are perceptions that we acquire. So by never investigating the five khandhas, always operating from the five khandhas, from Sakya Ditti, then the result is dukkha. Suffering, because it is we're creating this sense of, when you're a child, if you're loved or you're not loved, or you're maybe parents like one child better than another, or they wanted a boy instead of a girl, or your mother dies when you're a baby and you're brought up by stepmother, and there's all kinds of other, conditioning processes and identities that take place. And we form a sense of our self-worth and accordingly. And so we're bound, when we're young, we're just kind of helpless. We get whatever is happening. Whatever is going on, we absorb that. So there's always these problems about me and my problems, myself as a person, the sense of loneliness, isolation, separateness. Then coming from Western society, where the self is, at least in a country like Thailand, they do have Buddhism as a basis. So the anatta teaching is, whether every Thai Buddhist understands that or has any insight into it is something else. But as a cultural basis, they have that, anatta, non-self. But we don't have that. in Western society. It's all about the self. It's about me, competitive social way of learning, position in society. And so it's the self is all we have really to live with, is me as a person. Now if one has a religious belief, like believing in God, or something like that, that helps. At least you have a sense of something beyond yourself. But even God can be another form of parental judgment, The old man up in the sky, the patriarchal judge, how we create that idea, that vision of God is very conditioned. So it's also a form of Sakkaya Ditthi. So in Buddhist practice, notice that there's not a concept of God. So it has no, it's not conceived or formed. There's no quality. The unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. It has no quality, does it? But on an intellectual level, it sounds like nothing. Like remember, the intellect, the thinking mind, is dualistic. So all it can do is either affirm or deny. You're caught in that structure. I believe in God, or I don't believe in God. Or you can be like agnostic. Maybe, I don't know, possibility. All these are ways of the Sakkaya creating the sense of I'm a believer, I'm an atheist, or an agnostic. And then with sati sampajanya is rather than asking you to believe in anything, to affirm or deny, but to awaken and recognize. So this is like Paccuppanna Dhamma, here and now. This is the way it is. Right now there's this. Sound of silence. Now that I've cultivated, but if you don't notice that, or you don't know what I'm talking about, be aware of that, of doubt, of confusion. Or bring attention to the obvious, like the posture or the breath. So like with samatha practices, samatha vipassana, samatha is developing a concentration in which you start with vitakka vichara, or thinking of some sort, creating an image, having a kasina or an object to focus on. It can be anapanasati, the breath. It can be the concept of loving kindness or candle flame, or anything that has a shape and a form, vitakka vichara. And then that's the first jhana. And then seeing the suffering of being caught in vitakka vichara, which brings piti sukha, you let go of that. So in fourth jhana, then there is upekkha, or equanimity. So this is starting from, say, an object, from samatha, and going through what they call the jhana factors, vitakka vichara, piti sukha, ekaggata. So vitakka vichara is the object, the result is piti or rapture, sukha, mental joy, which leads to upekkha or equanimity. And then the arupa jhanas, space, consciousness, nothing, space, conscious nothingness, and neither perception nor non-perception. Now the problem I had with this way of teaching was the Sakyaditthi was so strong in me, the sense of me as a person was so powerful that my attempt to get jhanas was, coming from this Sakyaditthi, not from faith in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha even, but just me, Sumedho, trying to get first jhana. The arupa jhana seemed so refined that I didn't even think about them. That was just neither perception nor non-perception. Try to perceive neither perception nor non-perception. I can't do it. It's just your thinking mind packs up. You get confused. I fumble around with different views or opinions. But if it's neither perception or non-perception, it's inconceivable. Now, this Sakyaditthi is because this was what I had to really get perspective on. The sense of myself and my ability to meditate, or whether I'm a good meditator or not, and trying to live up to what the teacher was teaching. So you'd have, and as a layperson, what taught, you'd have interviews, and you'd end up trying to say things to please the teacher, or what you think the teacher wanted to hear. And because the Sakyaditthi was, you didn't even know what you were doing. You were just kind of doing what you heard the teacher, how you interpreted what the teacher was saying. But if Sakyaditthi is never recognized, then even the best intentions are motivated by that delusion. And so the result is always suffering. So that's why when I took the Samanera ordination and spent that year in this monastery in Nongkai, and I took that word of the Buddha, just that one I usually give to the newly ordained, and that's all I had was that one book. Not very, it's manageable size. I couldn't afford to get the whole Tripitaka. But just by spending a year contemplating and suddenly getting insight into these Four Noble Truths, because that's what that word of the Buddha is, it deals with this essential teaching of the Buddha. And so, like, learning to just contemplate, to open to suffering, I could easily understand the meaning of suffering, of dukkha, as an intellectual thing, so such a basic kind of human experience. But then putting it into it should be understood. And I think, well, I understand the word. Yeah, sure, everybody suffers. Everybody knows that. Kind of, but that wasn't the answer, isn't it? It's not my opinion about suffering, or because I know what the word means, but it's observing. Now, when you're alone like that for a year, at the beginning there was a lot of suffering. Because I'd never done that before. So I put myself into this position. And, I didn't have anyone to talk to. There's nobody could speak English. So I was just with this one little book. And nothing else to do. I didn't have a laptop or an iPod or a radio or even a novel or any kind of this, other than this one book. So, I deliberately put myself in that position. And it's not a very thick book. It's like a pamphlet, really, but it has the essential teachings from the suttas. And so, but it's not some, at least it was a compilation in a simple way of the very essential teachings from the scripture. But then it wasn't like a lot of commentarial explanations of others. I had to actually do it, suffering, its causes, the cessation and the path. And so this was, kind of like jumping into the deep end. Before you know how to swim, you either drown or learn how to swim. Well then, of course, you're alone in a foreign country. It was just a very primitive kuti. No electricity, no mosquito screens, just wooden planks nailed onto posts, tin roof, and I had a toilet, hole in the floor kind of thing, and a rain barrel, catch the rain. There's no running water. So, this was living, in a way that I'd never had to live before, coming from a nice city like Seattle, where you take all the electricity, running water, all that for granted. And so it's kind of, your emotions react to it. Now in that, because of the intense suffering at first, then this First Noble Truth I just began to rather than try to get samatha, at first I just tried to resist the suffering by doing a lot of concentration. So I'd, kind of force my mind to concentrate. And then after a while I couldn't do it. I couldn't just use my willpower coming from sakyaditi to make my mind stick on the object. Because being in that situation, there's so much unresolved emotions that were coming up into consciousness. I was 32 years old at the time, so there was 32 years of unresolved emotional habits that I couldn't, I tried to control them through concentrating the mind on the breath. But I couldn't, after a while, to spend the whole day and night doing that, just from the sakyaditi level of me, trying to get jhanas, was totally frustrating and exasperating. You go into very negative states of despair. So then when it comes to Vipassana, then and the Four Noble Truths, the four foundations of mindfulness, then you're starting from the here and now, whatever way it manifests. And so this is, I found this approach, suitable to me, because at least I could do this. I couldn't get the jhanas, but I could be aware of what I was feeling in the present. So one had to bear with all the fears, conceits, doubts, repressed anger, repressed resentments, self-hatred, and then it would be, criticisms and paranoia. I'd get paranoid. I'd get into states of paranoia where I'd think there were all kinds of evil forces around me. I'd start thinking the monks in the temple and the nuns were out to get me, going into kind of madness of proliferating negativity. But through that determination to, I found out because I couldn't control it, I just had to bear with it. So I just managed to sit and bear with whatever came into consciousness. Listening to it. And as I gave up trying to control it out of sakkaya-ditthi, there was a kind of resignation, kind of giving up of this sense of I've got to control, I've got to get something, I've got to get rid of these kilesas, I've got to conquer the kilesas and get the jhanas and things like this. When I gave up, coming from that assumption, just more or less resign myself to being there, then I found that Four Noble Truths teaching really skillful way of examining the here and now. So this is, it's like, I don't know if many people can do that, because I watched, there was a meditation monastery in a forest outside of Nong Khai, the town of Nong Khai, and they bring in monks to do these, what they call Khao Hong retreats, where you go into a kuti and you stay there, and they bring you the food. And you do this Burmese type Mahasi Sayadaw meditation. And while I was there, I watched, so many monks come and give up. After a few days, they just can't take it. Because it is, it's the deep end. And one wasn't, I wasn't a prisoner. I was talking to John McCarthy. I wasn't kind of incarcerated in a prison like he was. I could have left any time. Not that anybody was forcing me, tying me down or, binding me to the kuti. But something in me was so determined, that sense of, kind of sense beyond the sense. I don't even know what it was that compelled me to stay there. When I could have easily left. But this is what, it's like this something in me, something I can't explain, something that's not my personality, beyond this Sakyaditi level, that knew what to do, and even though on a personal level I was all over the place. So that's why, coming from my own experience, which my intention is to share it, not to say you should do what I do, but it is about human individual that, and how I actually dealt with suffering. And the Sakyaditi, this sense of me as a separate personality, me, this human body. Now, after a while, through just giving up and just paying attention, you're in a state, so you can't. I had the Samanera 10 precepts, so there was a level of commitment to moral behavior and restraint within that, that structure. But, so in terms of action and speech, I tried to, limit myself to there was nothing else to do, nowhere to go, nobody to talk to, no kind of distraction other than, the natural conditions around. So I'd get fascinated by, there were the dogs. Every Thai monastery has a lot of dogs in it. So, because Thai people don't like to kill animals, so when their dogs have puppies, they dump them inside the monasteries. So in some monasteries it's overrun by dogs. Well, when there's nothing to do all day long, all night long, you take interest in anything. So I just observed the dogs. I began to observe how they acted, and then I'd sympathize, and I'd see some dogs I didn't like at all, and other dogs that were pathetic, wretched creatures, and of course, take sides with the underdog. And then there's a top dog in a monastery, the boss that bullies and controls all the other dogs. And then, of course, I hated him, and all my sympathy went to the underdog. But then in this process, observing this, how this is nature, isn't it? When we're not mindful, we end up like that. Survival of the fittest. Because as individual entities, as animals, as separate entities, then it is a matter of learning to survive. If you're tough and strong, then you have more chance of survival than if you're weak in the jungle. So in that's so before I just seen dogs as pets, little pets that you had, pet poodles and Pekingese puppies that were cute and cuddly. Or big Labradors that slobbered all over you. But not as a society of dogs that were feral, that didn't belong to anybody, but just doing their dog thing without any owner, any human influence. Except, they'd be fed. The monks would feed them leftover food. So, and I thought, that's not much different. That's like being in top dog and the underdog. This is my experience in the Navy. This is what military life was like. You learn how to survive by ways that you develop habits of survival to a way of dealing with these different conditions for survival, for the surviving purposes. So then the fear and the sense of sakyaditi always is this causes this sense of fear, personal danger, personal vulnerability. Even in a safe place, because physically maybe, we can be moral. We determine not to kill or harm each other physically. Mentally, verbally, we can be very abusive. Hurt our feelings, hurt my feelings. Or from sakyaditi level, I can be so needy of somebody else's approval that, if they don't speak to me, then I could easily feel hurt the whole day or for days after. There's a sense of that for me to feel okay about myself, I needed confirmation from outside. I needed mother and father, I needed friends, I needed teachers, or those above me to say, you're all right, we love you still. And if I didn't get that information, then I'd be thrown off, I'd be frightened or confused. So the personality is very dependent, conditioned on how, our own karma, of how the things that affected us, the way we grew up, the conditions that we experience from birth, affects us, how we see ourselves, how we create ourselves, what we expect or dread or fear. How we've learned to survive in the family with the mothers and fathers that we have. How we've learned to survive in school or in social situations. Through various techniques of doing the best with what you have. One thing about being tall is that, I found that I didn't, I was always the tallest one in the class, even in primary school. So I was always at the end of the line, and we were marching. We had these kind of parades and that, and I was always placed at the very end, and I thought, it would be nice to be short and be at the front. So because always being at the end, taking it personally, almost seemed like the ones that really, were important ones were the ones in front because but it was all arranged according to size. So what's the logic in that? To be short means you get the front seat. To be tall, you're stuck in the back. And then as reaching adolescence, then I found out being tall was an asset. Then actually, girls liked tall boys more than short ones. So you suddenly find yourself seen in a different way, feeling I'm tall. And girls at that age, 13, 14 years old, seemed to be more attracted to someone taller than themselves than someone shorter. Well, this is just about physical height, isn't it? How we form a sense of ourself, our desirability, or our, place in the structure according to height, or according to gender, being male or female, according to whether we're fat or thin. Like fat is always made fun of, isn't it? So if you're fat, you're abused a lot when you're a child. You're made fun of, and boys and girls, fat boys, fat girls, and so and they have a sense of our self-worth according to that we're fat or thin, or complexion, fair or dark, or blonde or brunette, and the whole sense of Sakya Ditti is formed through all these kind of experiences. And as a child, we're innocent, so we don't know any better. We're just learning how to survive in the society we find ourselves in. Well, then in Pacchubbana Dhamma, these are, the karma, say, vipaka karma, as they arise in the present. So you have, you can't make yourself into, the perfect physical image or the ideal person. But you learn how to maybe be more charming, more witty. If you're very pretty and things, you can get by on just being visually attractive. But if you're not that pretty, then you've got to develop other means, to be more interesting or more something. And so the personality evolves from experience. Now, in the Sangha life, the whole idea of the samana is shaving the head and putting on the robe, which is a way of reminding ourselves we're not here to use those kind of. We don't have to survive that way anymore through being attractive or charming or whatever. This isn't the point of this life. And yet, if we never see Sakya Ditti and how it affects us, then this life becomes another form of Sakya Ditti. The structure, the seniority, the hierarchical structure, becomes Sakya Ditti for us. Or the ideals, like the samana, during these morning reflections. What is a samana? Is it somebody, a personality, who's really given up everything, and is it about me having to give up everything and be selfless? Or is it reflecting on the results of self, of how, I can create myself as a samana. I can attach to the ideal of a samana, of an alms mendicant. And so I've got the idea and I attach to it and then try to act like a samana. It's still Sakya Ditti, isn't it? It's still you're still going to suffer no matter how hard you try to be saintly or good or the ideal samana. Until you actually insightfully see the cause of suffering. And so Sakya Ditti is the self-view, this separate self-view. Whether, in monastic life you can become very lonely in this life, even though we live together in community. So a few years ago everybody was trying to be kalyanamitas. This was the word in everybody's mind here. To be really good friends with each other, to get to know each other, to learn to listen, non-violent communication, caring for each other, being here for each other, being, a Kalyanamitta is a beautiful friend. And so this idea of trying to become Kalyanamitta to each other seemed to be the flavor of that year. Well, that's very good. That's ideal, and it's not to disparage it. But if it's still coming from Sakkayaditthi, what does it do? Listening to each other from the Sakkayaditthi level, from the personal, from the, trying to fit into this ideal of Kalyanamitta. What's the result? And so then there's still suffering. Nobody can, to ask somebody else to be there for me and be my friend and listen to me and care about me is, asking too much of anybody. So then, we felt betrayed by friends or Kalyanamittas we've had who we felt betrayed by them because when we really needed them, they weren't there, deserted. And then this goes back into Sakkayaditthi again. So I'd hear this word betrayed a lot. It's an accusation of being betrayed by your best friend or someone you trusted, your best friend, your Kalyanamitta, betrayed you. And so then this is the result of wanting somebody else to make you feel good, to make you feel secure by always being there to support you, being here for me and through my trials and tribulations. Special friend maybe, or best friend. When I was a little boy, we always had best friend. He's my best friend. And so that when you had another little friend that you you really related to in a personal way, as you liked this boy better than the rest. Best friend. But in Sati Sampatanya, it's not. This is not criticizing this. It's not judging Sakkayaditthi at all, but it's recognizing it. And so it's not about Sakkayaditthi is bad or you've got to get rid of self-view, but to be able to see self-view as an object. Now, how do you do that? How can you see self-view, Sakkayaditthi, as an object? If your self-view is all you know, then you're always living this life with a sense of self. So it doesn't work. It's not going to free you and liberate you just by putting on the robe, shaving the head, putting on the robe. Because that's not even, clothes are not the issue. But it's about this awakening, Buddha Dhamma Sangha, Paccuppanna Dhamma, to be able to reflect on the way it is. Now, with sati, then, that's why I keep saying, if I'm trying to be mindful, me, Ajahn Sumedho, trying to be mindful, then, it's coming from Sakkayaditthi. I'm coming from the idea that I'm not mindful and I've got to develop mindfulness. So when you hear people saying, well, I'm trying to be more mindful, and that is kind of, you begin this, it's not the way. It's not about trying. It's about being. There's a difference, isn't it? I've got an idea of what mindfulness is, and then I try to do it. Or being mindful. Paccuppanna, in the here and now. So if I've got this idea that I'm not mindful enough and I've got to develop mindfulness, I begin to notice that I create this sense of I'm not very mindful and I should be, is like this. This is a sense of me, there's something wrong with me, because, I should be mindful, and then I do things that obviously mean that I'm not mindful. So I've got to try to become more mindful. Now this is the Sakya Ditti that we can observe. No matter how true it might be, maybe it is true. Is anyone's personality mindful? Can you be really mindful from Sakya Ditti level, from being this person, being me and mine? We can convince ourselves that I'm more mindful than you are, or I'm less. But the Paccuppanna means that this sense of I'm got to become mindful. Is it wrong to think that? I shouldn't think that. I should just be mindful. It's still Sakya Ditti. So it's not a matter of thinking about it or believing in anything you're thinking or the sense of self, but observing it. So it's this sati panya level, which is always here and now. You can't trying to be mindful tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll practice mindfulness. If you believe these kind of thoughts, then you're always, somebody who's not mindful enough trying to become more mindful. When all you need to do is really be aware of that. Not from the judging level. It's not judging, I shouldn't have an ego, or the fact that I try to be mindful is wrong. It is the way it is. I'm trying to develop mindfulness. Once I observe that, there's an observing of this thinking. So that I call the Buddha, the Bhutto, the aware, the observer, knower of the worlds. So it's coming from jnana knowing rather than me knowing all about the Dhamma from having read all the scriptures. So when I first had this insight, just play the scenario of me and mine and listen to it. Just listen to the fears and the emotions, the loneliness, the angst, the confusion. But also in the sense of listening, being the listener, not the object that I'm listening to. So I had this kind of perception of like watching television or melodramas or listening to the neighbors, gossiping on the other side of the fence. They go, na na na, blah 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 blah, and listening to whatever is in my mind. And, really listening not for judging, but for observing. Is this which is aware is not that person, is not that feeling. the sense that I'm not very mindful and I should be more mindful. This awareness is not that. It's not this person that believes they're not mindful enough. And then, when a Sakyaditi takes over, then I can convince myself I've got to be more mindful. So in community life, and make a mistake or say something I shouldn't, or blunder, blow it in some way or another in the community, then the inner tyrant will say, you should be more mindful. You shouldn't have, you've really lost your mindfulness, and by blowing up at somebody, or maybe not as heavy as that, just saying something slightly off, or inappropriate, or insensitive, then this sense of you shouldn't. So there's this inner judge. This is like the thinking mind's very judgmental. It knows everything about how you should be and shouldn't be. It grabs all the ideals and the best. A good monk, a good nun should be, and you were not very good today. So you're not a very good monk, not a very good nun, because you were not very mindful. That's still Sakyaditi. That judgmental force in one that knows it all, knows what's right and wrong, and absolutely, condemning when you make a mistake, or when I make a mistake, or do something inappropriate, or say something, or even think something. It's right there, ready to say, bad boy. But that which is aware, you see, is not judgmental. It's not about you being good or bad, or me being good or bad. It's aware of that sense of being good or bad. And that awareness then is not Sakyaditi. Because you don't, it's not about me getting rid of Sakyaditi. It's about the ability to observe Sakyaditi. So this is like refuge in Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Buddha, Bhutto, pure conscious knowing from this position, from this point of consciousness, the human bodies that we have. It's from this little spark in the universe, this human form that we identify with and limit ourselves to all the time through ignorance. That's why we suffer, because we're binding ourselves to such unsatisfactory conditions all the time. Kind of like being tied up all the time in the limitations of identity with your physical body, or your emotions, or your views and opinions, your memories, your habits. And the liberation then comes not through committing suicide, cutting your throat, or suppressing your feelings, but in awakening to them. So that's like the 5 khandhas, being awake, aware of these conditions, of these 5 heaps, or these 5 categories. That are merely an expedient way of looking at conditioned phenomena. Not personal, not about my 5 khandhas. So, and then from that, then the Sakyaditi, Silavata, Paramasa, Vicikicca, the first 3 fetters. So Vicikicca is translated as doubt, and doubt is the result of being attached to thinking. So as long as you attach and try to think your way in Buddhism, to think about yourself and the Sangha and Buddhism and Theravada Buddhism and all the rest, as long as you're caught in that thinking about it, you're always it will really reinforce Sakyaditi and Vicikicca, Silavata, Paramasa. because the thinking process is dualistic. It's not whole. It has its limits. You can only think so far, and then the thoughts stop. The non-plus mind, where suddenly your mind goes blank. And so, in being able to recognize when the thinking process stops, when you can't just rattle on endlessly in your thoughts and ideas and conceptual proliferations, but where that suddenly packs up. So it's usually like a shock, isn't it? Where you're shocked and suddenly your mind goes blank, nothing comes. Or in like the koan in the Zen Buddhism, the kind of conundrum that has no answer to it. It's a totally impossible question. What is the sound of the clap of one hand? Or what was my original face before I was born? That kind of thing. And then, you ask these questions, and what happens when you these koans, you try to think about them, try to figure them out with your intellect. You can really wind yourself up with your thinking process, or to be aware of that where the thinking process stops, packs up, doesn't operate at the moment. Now, sound of silence is that way for me. It stops the thinking process. So I can, notice this sound of silence, and all the proliferating tendencies stop at that moment. It's like a poise on the edge, on the razor's edge. On the tightrope, you're suddenly just caught in this moment of being nonplussed, of being poised. Before anything happens, there's awareness. Now, the sound of silence, once recognized, then it is like a stream. So you begin to notice it. Sustain interest in it or attention on it. Because it's not, you don't create it, and it's always present here and now, no matter what state of mind you're in. So it's like a referral, remembering. And then the thinking, the proliferating thought habits cease at that moment, and then sustaining it in this kind of empty silence, this poised, empty state of awareness. So it's like you're suspended in this poised state of just attentiveness. And we can appreciate this. Now this is cultivating this is real bhavana, because then that is what they call stream entry. You are, from there on, know how to practice, know how to cultivate with the body and the remaining karma that you have, whatever that might be. But you can never be liberated through Sakya Ditti, Silabhatra Paramasa Vicikicca. Because as long as those are, dominant in your consciousness, that's where you operate from, then you're just a creature of habits then. Even the monastic life becomes a form of self-view, becomes an identity, becomes sakyaditi silabata bharamasa vicikicca. So you see here people who've been monks or nuns for years, and they're kind of disappointed because they haven't got what they were expecting from it. Maybe you're expecting something. When you become a monk or a nun, you kind of hope to get enlightened, or you're looking forward to something, to developing or getting something that you aspire to. And then after years, if these three fetters are not recognized, after years of dedicated practice, you're going to be disappointed because you're not going to get what you expect from the sakyaditi level. It's going to be a dismal disappointment. So that's why emphasizing these fetters is to keep reminding you of this is the problem. Not the tradition, not the structure, not hierarchy, not vinaya or anything like that. These are not obstructions. It's how we grasp these conditions out of habit, out of ignorance. These are the fetters that bind us to the samsara and swarm like worms within our living clay. So, see that this opportunity, what I'm pointing at is liberation. I'm not trying to tell you how you should be or try to, control you through hierarchical positioning or through personal preference. It's not about personal liking or disliking, preferring one over another. It's about awakeness here and now, and to keep encouraging you, because it is sad to see people after so many years of dedicated monastic life being so miserable. It's when one has tried to present as best one possibly can the liberation that comes through awareness. Now, looking back on my own life as a monk, I'm really grateful. This has been sometimes I just feel incredible gratitude of having an opportunity to live like this. It's not a part of my cultural expectation or anything. It just happened. Conditions came together where I found myself, where I could came across Buddhism and then the opportunity to become a monk. And so these things they weren't like I went out on a spiritual journey to seek them. It just seemed like things would come my way or suddenly, and I just seized the opportunity. But the result is a sense of gratitude and real respect for the Buddha, for the teaching of the Buddha, the power of that teaching, the precision of it, the clarity of it. But the teaching is not about grasping the ideas of Buddhism, but using them, patipada, practice, for the result of patiwait, which is the insight, knowing from the gut level, knowing Dhamma in a direct way, not through ideas about it or personal definitions or views about Dhamma.